Everything can change in the National Football League literally in a matter of seconds. I mean, think about it. A single snap, just one single solitary season, it can alter the entire trajectory of a historic franchise forever. We're talking about swinging hundreds of millions of dollars in the absolute blink of an eye. Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we are pulling all the way back on the curtain. We're getting into one of the most volatile, high-stakes, sweat-inducing financial dramas unfolding in professional sports right now. We are looking at a situation that involves the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a quarterback out there desperately fighting for his entire legacy, and a looming ultimatum that could, and probably will, define the NFC for the next decade. And you gotta understand, this isn't just some boring story about a contract negotiation or salary cap space. No, this is a cinematic thriller, and it is playing out in real time right on the gridiron. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's dissect the $50 million ultimatum.
So I want you to ask yourself a question. What happens when a $100 million gamble suddenly flatlines? Just let the sheer weight of that question sink in for a minute. Seriously, let it sink in. Because in the NFL, $100 million, that is franchise-altering money. It is the kind of massive, earth-shaking investment that dictates whether coaches keep their jobs, whether front office executives have a career next year, and it carries the hopes of an entire city on its back. And in this league, the only thing more reliable than a massive payday is the absolute chaos that usually follows right behind it. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers? They pushed all their chips to the absolute center of the table. They made their bet. They looked at their roster, they looked at their future, and they made this massive, potentially catastrophic financial leap of faith. And then, the unthinkable happened. The heartbeat of that colossal investment just started to fade. The momentum completely stopped dead in its tracks. And right now, today, this organization is staring down into the abyss. They are holding a ticket for a ride they literally can't get off of, just sitting there wondering if they just completely bankrupted their franchise's future.
Okay, so to truly understand the sheer gravity of this crisis, we've got to trace it all the way back to its origins. Let's move to Chapter 1, the multi-million-dollar gamble.
Let's go back to 2023 for a second. I want you to imagine the sheer, suffocating pressure of walking into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers locker room back then. You aren't just joining a football team, you're stepping directly into the massive, unparalleled, completely impossible shadow left behind by the greatest player to ever touch a football, Tom Brady. Into that pressure cooker walks Baker Mayfield, a former #1 overall pick who had essentially been cast aside by the league, right? He signs a one-year prove-it deal, and the max value? Up to $6 million. $6 million. In the modern NFL, guys, that is backup money. That is the league looking you dead in the eye and saying, we don't believe in you anymore. But then, he completely defies the odds. He absolutely balls out. And that incredible resurgence leads us directly into 2024. The Buccaneers buy in. They believe. So they hand him a massive 3-year, $100 million extension. Think about that whiplash. From $6 million to $100 million. He is officially entrenched as the franchise quarterback. He made it back to the mountaintop. But, well, in the NFL, fortunes turn incredibly fast. Look at the timeline for 2025. It was an injury-riddled, devastating collapse. The absolute bottom falls out. The magic? Gone. Which brings us right to the terrifying reality of 2026, an unresolved future. We have tens of millions of dollars hanging in the balance, trapped somewhere between the MVP-level peak of 2024 and the agonizing valley of 2025. The whiplash of this financial volatility is just completely unprecedented.
Which brings us directly to Part 2, the injury-plagued collapse.
The contrast we are looking at here is just staggering. It is a grave, deeply tragic reality of the NFL that your championship aspirations can just evaporate before the leaves even finish turning colors in autumn. Look at his 2024 peak. Mayfield put up literal MVP-level production. 4,500 passing yards, 41 passing touchdowns, which, by the way, tied for the league lead. The offense was humming on all cylinders. They secured their 4th straight NFC South title. I mean, it was absolute dynamite. But then, we hit the 2025 reality, an epic, soul-crushing collapse. They burst out of the gates with a stellar 6-2 start, right? Looking virtually unstoppable. And then, they lost 7 of their last, actually, let me make sure you really hear that. They lost 7 of their last 8 games. They plummeted from the very top of the conference straight down into the abyss, completely missing the playoffs. And you know what the most agonizing detail of all this is? It's having to watch the Carolina Panthers, a team that finished with a mediocre, completely underwhelming 8-9 record, steal their division crown. To watch a sub-500 bitter rival host a playoff game while your shiny new $100 million quarterback is sitting at home on his couch, it is the ultimate, heartbreaking frustration in professional football.
So how does a collapse of that magnitude even happen?
Well, the attrition from that season paints a really vivid, really painful picture. This wasn't just a string of bad luck, it was physical decimation across the board. Early and often, the offensive line suffered widespread absences across the entire starting unit. And the biggest blow? They lost the absolute anchor of that line, Tristan Wirfs. We're talking about one of the premier left tackles in the entire game of football. You lose Wirfs, and the structural integrity of your entire offense just completely crumbles overnight. It's like pulling the foundation out from under a skyscraper. Then, on top of that, a star-studded receiving core gets utterly thinned out by multiple serious injuries. The weapons just disappear. And finally, inevitably, the toll reaches Mayfield himself. Now, to his credit, he heroically refused to miss a single start. But listen, the tape does not lie. His physical decline down the final stretch of that season was obvious to anyone watching. The erratic play, the lost velocity on his throws, forcing the ball into double coverage. The roster was battered, it was bruised, and ultimately, it was just broken.
So now we arrive at the present day. Chapter 3, the make-or-break season. Heading into 2026, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are approaching a massive franchise-altering crossroads. Look, this is year 3 of that $100 million deal we talked about, meaning they're staring right down the barrel of free agency in 2027 without any long-term extension in place. $35 million. I want you to read that number slowly. Just look at it. Because the bitter, agonizing irony of this entire situation is that the Buccaneers could have potentially secured Baker Mayfield for this exact bargain annual rate if they had simply extended him prior to this upcoming season. Think about it. Coming off those late-season struggles and all those injuries of 2025, his market had cooled down significantly. They could have locked him in at an imminent extension of $35 million, which, by the way, is an absolute steal for a competent starting quarterback when you look at how rapidly the league's salary cap is expanding right now. But they hesitated. They decided to wait. They wanted to see if that 2025 collapse was just a fluke or if it was the new, terrifying reality. And by waiting, by blinking, they've opened the door to a complete financial nightmare.
$50 million. Just let that massive, terrifying figure hang in the air in total silence for a moment. If Baker Mayfield steps onto the field in 2026 and returns to his explosive MVP-level form of 2024, if he goes out there and throws for another 40 touchdowns and leads this battered team deep into January, this right here is the steep, suffocating price the Buccaneers will be forced to pay just to prevent him from hitting the open market in 2027. $50 million per year. The cost of their front office hesitation is potentially $15 million annually. Do you realize what you can do with an extra $15 million a year in the NFL? That is the exact money you use to go out and sign an elite, game-wrecking pass rusher. That is the money you use to completely rebuild an offensive line. By refusing to extend him early, Tampa Bay is playing a high-stakes game of financial chicken that could literally paralyze their salary cap for the next half-decade.
But listen, do not mistake this for a one-sided risk. No way. This is Baker's gamble too. The stakes for Mayfield himself are incredibly high here. On one hand, yes, he could earn a massive, landscape-altering payday in 2027 if he stays healthy and replicates that 2024 peak performance. He could secure his family's wealth for generations to come. But on the other hand, what if the offensive line crumbles again? What if the injuries return? If he puts together another down year, his legacy is severely, maybe permanently damaged. The league might just write him off for good this time. He could be banished right back to the absolute purgatory of those one-year prove-it deals, begging teams just for a chance to start in training camp. At this stage in his career, the guy is exhausted by that cycle. He doesn't want to go back there. So for Baker Mayfield, 2026 isn't just about winning a few football games, it is quite literally about survival.
And to survive in this league, you must adapt, which brings us to our 4th chapter, a new offensive era. You absolutely cannot repeat the failures of the past and expect different results. The Buccaneers front office knows this, and heading into 2026, they have instituted sweeping, monumental tactical changes. Liam Cohen is out, and new offensive coordinator Zach Robinson arrives. Now, Robinson comes directly from a brilliant, highly successful coaching tree, meaning we are going to see a heavy reliance on lethal, Sean McVay-style concepts. We're talking tons of pre-snap motion, wide zone blocking schemes, foundational principles specifically designed to make the quarterback's life infinitely easier. But the scheme isn't really the problem here. The personnel is where the absolute heartbreak lies, because future Hall of Famer Mike Evans has departed for the San Francisco 49ers in free agency. I just want to pause on that for a second. That is a crushing, devastating loss for this franchise and this fan base. You cannot simply replace a living legend who has caught 1,000 yards every single year of his entire career. You just can't. And because of that massive departure, an immense, almost unfair level of pressure is now placed squarely on the shoulders of second-year receiver Amaka Igbuka.
Igbuka's role must expand drastically, and frankly, if he cannot fill even a fraction of the void left by Evans, Robinson's brilliant offensive scheme, it won't matter at all.
But hey, a championship team isn't built on offense alone, right? We must pivot to the defensive side of the ball, where Tampa Bay made a fascinating, highly scrutinized move. Meet Ruben Bain Jr. He's a rookie defensive lineman out of the University of Miami. Now, Bain actually dropped in the draft. Why? Because scouts picked apart his poor measurables. Specifically, they knocked him for having short arms. In a league that is completely obsessed with wingspan and athletic testing at the combine, Bain was heavily discounted. But guys, turn on the tape. Seriously, go turn on the tape of the national championship game where he absolutely destroyed Indiana. The kid is completely dominant. He plays with a level of violence and a natural leverage that simply cannot be measured by a stopwatch at a combine. The Buccaneers drafted him to be an absolute wrecker up front. His burden? Well, he has to instantly revitalize this defensive front and provide support for aging stars like Vita Vea, who, let's face it, is getting older and just cannot carry the interior of that line all by himself anymore. If Bain translates his collegiate destruction to the NFL, he becomes the undisputed steal of the entire draft.
Which leads us to the broader picture. Chapter 5, NFC Championship Contenders.
Because look, this isn't just some hyper-local Tampa Bay contract drama. Not at all. This situation has massive, league-wide implications for the Lombardi Trophy. I want to read this quote to you directly, and I really want you to feel the gravity behind these words from ESPN's Dan Orlovsky. He said, and I quote, "On paper, I think the Bucs are NFC Championship contenders. I really, really, really do." Orlovsky highlights that despite the agonizing collapse of 2025, and despite the monumental loss of Mike Evans, the foundation of this roster is still rock solid. They have a very good offensive line when it's fully healthy, they still have dynamic skill players, and in Orlovsky's eyes, Baker Mayfield remains the absolute best quarterback in that entire division. But the crucial point, the defining factor for them, is their heavy investment in the defensive line. By pouring huge draft capital into players like Ruben Bain Jr. to pair up with Vita Vea, the Buccaneers are reconstructing those dominant, terrifying defensive fronts that Tampa Bay is historically known for. They are a sleeping giant in the NFC, just waiting for the right spark.
And finally, that brings us to Chapter 6, the final ultimatum.
We have dissected the millions of dollars. We have analyzed the devastating injuries. We've gone through the tactical overhauls and the high-stakes draft picks. The impending 2026 kickoff carries apocalyptic stakes for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're talking front office jobs, coaching careers, and a quarterback fighting with everything he has to secure his legacy. The countdown has officially begun, and there is nowhere left for anyone to hide. So I leave you with this. Will this monumental gamble forge a modern dynasty, or will it completely bankrupt a franchise for a generation? Every single snap of this upcoming season carries the incredible weight of $50 million. Every throw, every single block, every defensive pressure from a rookie with short arms. The margin for error is absolutely zero. There is no safety net anymore. We will be watching history unfold in real time.
Welcome to NFL Nexus. We dive way deeper than the headlines to bring you the cinematic truth of professional football. If you want to really understand the game behind the game, you need to subscribe to the channel right now. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button on the video to help us push this deep dive content to the top of the algorithm, and I want you to comment down below on what you thought. Do the Bucs pay Baker the full $50 million, or does this whole thing fall apart? And if you want to take your support to the next level, support the channel by becoming a channel member today for exclusive access. Until the next snap, keep watching the details.